It's here, not dormant, neither redundant. It's pulsating, inspiring new ideas in IT services and product development for healthcare, supply chain, banking, financial services, and insurance, telecom, architecting tech evolution with artificial intelligence, big data, Internet of Things, blockchain. It's a future of transformative possibilities. A future we're carving at Futurism Technologies. Building your window to a new paradigm of digital transformation for the world, now and next. A window of smarter product lifecycle management to advance enterprise infrastructure with legacy integration. Create a digital roadmap for the new decade. Consult to realize products increasing productivity. Reduce time to market to increase ROI. A window perfected with our leadership in information technology, consulting, infrastructure and digital transformation with a global presence, a robust partner network, and a customer-focused quality approach. Backed with 18+ years of expertise in Internet of Things, artificial intelligence and machine learning, product development, blockchain, IT infrastructure, e-commerce. 6 pillars to think digital and carve the future of digital transformation that allows businesses to scale. Together, they have empowered our flexible delivery models. Etching 18 years of industry transformation for 1,000+ diverse clients, making us the ground zero for technology solutions and services to address enterprise vision, faster and with smarter approaches, with 3 major certifications and a passionate and diverse team of consultants and technologists. Solving problems, collaborating, and continuously learning. We're ready for transforming your world and its future. It's here. It's now. The future of digital transformation with Futurism Technologies.
Hi everybody. We begin on a sad note. Just few hours back, very unfortunately, we lost one of our panelists, his Carroll Fellows. He was the chairperson of IFA USA. We mourn her sudden demise, and may I request all participants to observe a 30-second silence in her memory, please. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on which part of the world you have logged in from. On behalf of the Indo-American Chamber of Commerce and Invest India, it is my pleasure to extend a warm welcome to all the members of the 14 chambers who have joined us today for this super exciting session on investments into India and USA, FDI, FPI limits, tax, and other factors. Allow me to set the business context before we get into the technical issues and solutions. India and the USA are in the process of rolling out the red carpet for business entities, big and small. In India, the Department for Promotion of Industries and Internal Trade wishes to give a fillip to the champion sectors in manufacturing. Make in India has identified 25 sectors, 15 in manufacturing and 12 in services. For the record, we account for 40% of America's over-the-counter and prescription drugs. Our mineral diamond exports to the superpower was $8.3 billion in 2018. On the US side, the economy seems to be getting stronger by the day. The overall trade deficit is down by 10%. Various sentiment index have listed US as the #1 destination for receiving FDI. On the Indian side, standing in the way is a genuine single window clearance for investors. A status check by a committee of secretaries revealed that 35 central ministries departments preside over a regime of 767 establishment pre-operation licenses. Add to this the multitude of expectations, inspections, and approvals, renewals after commencement of operations. The country's regulatory system needs to be a little more investor friendly. We have no dearth of opportunities. In our earlier sessions, both Mr. Piyush Goyal and Mr. Greg Kalba went out of their way to give the fantastic macro picture of the opportunities in their respective countries. Both countries are welcoming FDI with open arms. But where are the opportunities? What are the stumbling blocks? A robust supply chain is considered a necessity. MSME sectors on both sides are the answers. Fortunately, the government in India is providing a $3 trillion collateral-free loan to 4.5 million such units affected by the present pandemic. The 15 to 17% share of manufacturing in India's GDP is likely to see a spike. India is raring to go. The RBI survey of the Consumer Confidence Index stands at 100.5 points a year ahead, as against 53.8 presently, when the nation is battling COVID. That's the background. The groundwork is being laid for a spurt in industrial activities. FDIs have the requisite ambience. Bring them in for a win-win situation. We are on the cusp of an economic partnership of great significance. And to discuss this tonight, we have a galaxy of personalities from India, USA, and Singapore, each a luminary in their own field. Before I hand over to our BFSI chairman from WIC, Nilesh Vikamsey, to introduce the dignitaries, I have one more pleasant surprise for all. Indo-American Chamber of Commerce Western Region is proud to support the release of a fantastic, well-researched and illustrated book on doing business in India by Nishith, Desai and Associates. I am sure all those of you are listening in right now would have received your advance copy by email from Raki. Nishith bhai, I assure you that the publication will reach more than 10,000 people between the combined membership of all our partner chambers, 10% of whom have logged in today. That's the number I get from the backend team, that the registration is crossing 1,200, more than 10% of which is from overseas. With this, I request Nilesh to take over. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Naushad, for giving the wonderful backdrop. It's my privilege to give a very, very brief two-line introduction of today's expert panel, which you would agree is one of the best panel of specialists on today's subject, that is FDI, FPI, and tax issues in the Indo-US investment corridor. First and foremost, amongst us, we have Nishith Desai, our own a very innovative and research-driven lawyer, who's a visionary in the Indo-US investment corridor, having opened offices in US decades ago. Then we have Sunil Kaul, a very dear friend, who's a financial wizard, an ex-city banker who's presently the managing director and head of financial services of Carlyle Group in Southeast Asia. Carlyle Group is one of the largest and the most successful investment firms with about $195 billion in assets. 180-year-old, second largest law firm in the United States. Our own Kamlesh is the partner of the company, an expert in taxation and consulting, and the audit committee chair of UNICEF, and earlier the audit committee chair of International Monetary Fund, the first Indian to be the audit committee chair of IMF. Then we have Dave Springsteen, the practice leader of tax services group of Withum, which is the top 25 accounting and consulting firm in the United States of America. And the session is going to be moderated by two people, one no less amongst all these equals. One is Deepak Nambiar, who's from Drye, who chairs the India practice group of Kelley, as I mentioned, which is 180-year-old, second largest US law firm. And we have Rajesh Tripathy, who's from Withum, and who's got more than 15 years experience on the Indo-US corridor, having worked with a number of organizations, but focusing on the Indo-US corridor. With this, I now hand over today's proceedings to Rajesh and to Deepak to take for the fantastic panel which we have, and to understand the whole, issues in the investment in India and US. What are the issues in FDI, FPI taxation? Over to you, Deepak and Rajesh. Thank you.
Nilesh, really appreciate
Sorry for the
good morning, everybody here in the US, and good evening for people who are attending in the Southeast Asia, and good afternoon for people who are from other parts of the world. So as the session today is purely focused on the US-India corridor, so the question is that what is the relationship between the US-India? The trade between the US-India has grown steadily ever since the India's economy began to take off in mid-1990s. And from 1999 to 2018, the trade in goods and services between the two countries have gone to about 16 billion to 142 billion. And India is now the 8th largest trading partner of the US of India. So that said, I think the first question I will address it to Mr. Nishith Desai. So what are some of the recent trends relating to the foreign direct investment that you have seen in India, knowing that both US-India relationship has become much stronger, and United States is the 8th largest trading partner with India with 142 billion of trade. So Mr. Nishith Desai, what are your thoughts on the FDI investment into India?
It's absolutely we have been, I think, you can hear me, I hope. Okay. So if you look at the whole scene, what we thought would happen this year has completely changed the landscape. And, although we know that UNTITLed had warned the most, the impact of pandemic long ago, I think it has really happened. And we thought that everything will be hampered, So in many ways, we have seen some contrasting trends. One, that investment in manufacturing and in infrastructure has taken some beating. On the other hand, if you look at services, and particularly technology side, we see a huge upsurge. And all of you know about what happened to Jio, and 17 billion have come in already, 10 billion, some more committed by Google in the whole game. So where we see activity is in the areas of technology, media entertainment, in telecom, in pharma, healthcare, and medical devices, in agro-tech more than even agriculture per se. I think that is where we have seen even impact funds are playing a good role, like Omnivore and some other ones, Agro-tech is becoming very, very important thing. IoT is getting into the game and stuff like that, because all the nuances to that. And financial services is catching up. As far as insurance is concerned, that is seeing traction, because India has a huge gap in insurance market, and government has opened up insurance sector to foreign investors to invest up to 49%, but in case of intermediaries, it is 100% now. And so there are many interesting changes. The way in which I look at the trends are more in services at this point in time, and I think manufacturing, we are looking into see new trends. We'll talk about it as we go along, but there are very interesting opportunities coming up, So these are some of the trends we see,
Thank you, Nishith. So switching the gear to Kamlesh. So Kamlesh, you know that as Nishith did mention that the trend of the investment from US to India is increasing, and also you're well aware that the US-India has signed the defense contract. Lockheed is now looking at manufacturing the F-16 and F-21 in India right now. So that said, what are your thoughts around that? That where do you see the FDI really gearing towards, from US to India?
So at the outset, of course, I must, ask everybody that be safe. And as far as COVID is concerned, please don't take chances and take full precautions, because it's a very dreadful disease. And one must take full precautions to, maintain one's health, or oneself and one's family as well, and near and dear. So having said that, I think, Rajesh, you have started at a very right note on the FDI investment in India. The entire geopolitical situation in the world is now changing, with things happening on India-China side, and several other developments are taking place, which throw open a lot of opportunity for India. And as India and America have an age-old relationship, and we have decades of relationship on commerce and trade. And therefore, I believe what you said was just a starting point on Lockheed and other manufacturing coming to India. Along with the large ones, I personally believe that even the medium size and the small enterprises in USA will find a lot of opportunity in India because of the sheer size of market, the demography of our country, and the opportunities you have on various trade, commerce, and services. So with this, thank you very much for my opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Kamlesh. And switching the gear to Hoonar. So, Mr. Hoonar, as you know that on August 4th, the US government came out with the new policy where they have agreed to collaborate with India on setting up universities in India, basically establishing US schools will set up, colleges will look at setting up their campuses in India. So I think defense that we talked about the campuses, colleges opening up in India. We talked about services, agri is something that the government is focusing on. What are your thoughts, something around that? What do you think on the FDI front, how the relationship can get much stronger,
Sure. So I think we covered very well, Mr. Desai, in terms of the sectors that most of the U.S. investment is going to come in over the next at least few years. And it's going to be some services. I would probably like to take a step back and have a quick look at the bigger picture. And you mentioned the interest that we are seeing around defense and more strategic areas, even in energy and so on. One of the things that actually caught my eye was I was looking at some data around the interest that we are seeing from US investors. And just the traffic on our website, Invest India website, we have seen that searches from US have spiked about 4 times in terms of looking for opportunities in setting up businesses or partnerships in defense, and about 3 times in terms of healthcare. So I think that hints to the larger strategic relationship. That is what is converging both these countries together. Of course, in the longer term, the economic strength of India is very critical to the entire Indo-Pacific region for the US. And from that perspective as well, I think we are going to continue on this path of converging interests, more investments into services, but also into defense, healthcare, pharmaceuticals, and so on. So I'll take a pause there.
Thank you, Hoonar. So I think I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Deepak to ask the next set of questions, to our panelists. Deepak, over to you.
Thank you, Rajesh, and hello everyone. Good evening and good morning to the panelists as well as the attendees. Thank you for this opportunity. I guess my first question is really to Nishith, Kamlesh, Sunil, Kaul, and Hoonar again. We do hear about U.S. businesses moving their operations from China to India post-COVID, and also in the wake of the current U.S.-India relations, and also, of course, U.S.-China relations, more important. And do you see any shift in such manufacturing operations moving from China to India, or is this more wishful thinking at this time? That's number one. And number two, to follow up to that question, what are some of the opportunities and challenges that you see with the shift from U.S. businesses from China to India? So maybe I will kind of ask a question first to Nishith, followed by Kamlesh, Sunil, and Hoonar.
Indeed, a very good question, and what we are seeing is twofold thing. Number one, while there is a lot of talk around moving from China to India, one set of things is that so much investment has gone on large scale in China, it is not easy to uproot that overnight and bring them to India, first of all. Secondly, the India's economic survey of 2016-17 said that India has the opportunity to promote apparel, leather, and footwear kind of sectors as well. But what unfortunately seems to happen is that has not moved to India, but they have moved to Bangladesh and Vietnam. what we feel is that because, of course, of the historical issues, regulatory and land issues and many other kind of things that come in, manufacturing has slight difficulty in suddenly shifting from India to China. Now, one option for Indian company is to look at via media, okay, move to Vietnam in interim, and then in next 3-4 years you can move back to India and stuff like that. But I think there is an opportunity, and of course, like Apple and other ones have been looking at India to introduce Apple phone 11 and all that. So there will be some movement, but it is not very easy to migrate from China to India, and I think we'll have to make very special effort, into the whole thing. Also, second thing is that India needs to develop the art of visualization, the large-scale visualization. The scale at which we see operations in China are very large, very huge, and that is one art we need to learn, how to visualize global markets and not just look at Indian market. Second point is that manufacturing, we need to be very careful about the pollution issues. So one thing is that it can be pollution creating as well in China. How many people can speak about it? I have no idea, and how things happen. But at the same time, there is another area which we need to be careful. Third point on manufacturing is that once you invest and get a technology, transition to new technology is slightly tricky, and because of the advent of automation and robotics and other ones, a lot of things have to be quickly recaptured. So very quickly you tap global markets, move to the next technology, next. Those are kind of things I see in manufacturing. So while I'm very happy that the things will be coming, so in medium term, I would expect India to attract more from China. In the short term, I think, as I mentioned, I'm going back for a moment to services. And even in defense or whatever you call it, after purchasing the equipment, they need to be serviced, otherwise they will get junk. And a lot of things have to be done. So I believe that we should be positioning and repositioning ourselves. But this is the trend I've seen. If there are anything that needs to be changed in terms of labor laws, to land regulations, to pollution environmental clearances. In Vietnam, it takes 55 days to get all the clearances. And if we can have that kind of a benchmark, that would be good, irrespective of the state or center whosoever is responsible. But together, we have to do something very quickly. The speed is the name of the game. So that will be my immediate reaction to the whole thing. No doubt, there are many opportunities, but somewhere we'll need to focus on pharma, and those industries have been traditionally excellent, and we can build on healthcare sector, as was mentioned already, build on the medical devices, high-tech kind of stuff, value-added kind of stuff, and, pharma intermediates and all that can come more easily to India, I think. So wherever we have strength, we should do everything to get those investments into India. This is my short, while ecosystem for manufacturing is developing, let us go home on the service. So I say services in short term, manufacturing in medium term. I have a clear path around that within 5-6 years or whatever it is. So I think that is the way.
Thank you, Nishith. Thank you so much for that. Maybe I'll just move to Sunil next. Sunil, you run a business and you're based in Singapore. What is the sentiment in Southeast Asia? From what you see from as a business owner, and also generally speaking from that part of the world into coming to India from a business shift perspective.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. I think in terms of movement of businesses and operations out of China, I know there's a lot of talk, a lot of discussions, and for sure, some of that, there may be some anecdotal evidence of some, stuff happening, but it takes time to make large investment decisions, and so it's a bit too early to tell definitively how that will play out. Of course, one would certainly expect some supply chain reorganizations in industries like pharmaceuticals, chemicals, electronics, and so on. And we have, in fact, started to see some of this already happening, for example, in pharmaceuticals, as Mr. Desai just mentioned. Obviously, India will be competing with other alternatives, like a number of countries here in Southeast Asia. I think Vietnam was mentioned a few times, and I cover that for my, in my job. And they are clearly a very welcoming destination. There are a lot of established businesses there. And so the ecosystem, which is very important for manufacturing facilities, has to an extent already been set up. And so we have to compete with that in India. And we also have to recognize that when some of these decisions come up for movement of operations, an option that many large companies will consider is onshoring, because there are distinct political benefits and other related upsides for them in the current, nationalistic environment, which seems to be spreading all around the globe. India does have compelling advantages, and we all know that the great, the domestic market, the GDP per capita in the urban areas has now crossed $2,000, and this will provide very strong tailwinds. I'm sure if you look back at China itself, when they crossed this 2,000 level sometime in mid-2000s, there was a very sharp increase in a number of industries which attracted investment. And then, India has advantages in areas like technology, where India is a lot more open than China. And so we have seen large players like Microsoft, Google, Facebook, etc., invest large amounts of money in different, verticals within India. And we could list a lot of other attractions, but I will re-emphasize the point that has already been made, that for all this to happen in a big and sustained way, we need to keep simplifying the regulatory and the tax ecosystem and offer more predictability and stability in these areas. I'm sure my fellow panelists who have a lot more knowledge and experience in this will be addressing this, but I think that is critical for us to, be able to make a real claim on some of these businesses to be moving to India. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Sunil. And maybe I'll move to Kamlesh, and then after that to Hoonar. So Kamlesh, from a tax perspective, and also generally, you talk to a lot of businesses, and then probably they come to you and Hoonar first before they come to us lawyers. So what are you seeing in India?
So whilst I completely agree with my predecessors, Nishith and Sunil, on the fact that shifting manufacturing is not easy. It takes time. It takes decades. And I also agree that you need to create a proper environment, a long-term sustained environment of predictability in tax systems and regulatory systems, so that people who want to invest are aware what they are getting into. So that's a must. Having said that, I think Prime Minister Modi was in USA last September, where he made a very big announcement, and which is extremely important. If you set up manufacturing in India after that date, after 1st of October of last year, for the next 3 years till 23, the tax rate is as low as 15% plus surcharge, which comes to something like 17%, which is definitely a good rate of income tax as far as any country goes. It's comparative internationally and probably lower than many of the regimes internationally. That is one. Number two, we had a plethora of indirect taxes, in the form of excise duty, sales tax, value-added tax, luxury tax, this tax, that tax, and whatnot. In 2017, India merged all these taxes into one tax. And mind you, we also, like USA, are a federal system. We have the federal government and we have state governments. We have several states. And to bring everybody on board, so everybody came on board, all the federal government and all the state government, they passed a law called the Goods and Services Tax, where all the indirect taxes have been merged, and it's a seamless flow of credit. So there's no cascading impact of tax on tax as far as indirect tax is concerned. So that's also a very big. There are administrative issues right now on the backbone of the GST platform, where there are some teething trouble, but I'm sure the design of the tax is extremely good. 1 point, straight away, administration also is one. You don't have to go to multiple agencies. So these are some of the positive, points of the setting up of businesses, which, the investors should consider. And thirdly, of course, the government of India recently has announced in that Atmanirbhar announcement, what they made, the Prime Minister, that they are going to look at land, labor, and law. Even the legal system in India is, takes a lot of time to redress a legal issue. So they are going to address all these three issues. I'm sure the government of India is looking at easing out various things and laying a platform, a long-term platform for manufacturing to come to India. Thanks, Deepak.
Thank you. Thank you. Apnar, maybe I'll go to you for questions, please.
Sorry, Deepak, you broke up a little over there. Can you repeat, please?
Yeah, sorry, I was asking you about the same question. What are you seeing so far as a shift from shift by businesses from China to India? Do you see a real shift happening, or what do you see on the ground?
Yeah, sure. So I think it is definitely not wishful thinking. But if the constraints and the bottlenecks and the issues that Mr. Desai and Sunil and Kamlesh highlighted, if those are not dealt with fairly quickly, it might turn into that. We have been seeing, having said that, we've been seeing a lot of interest from investors in terms of moving from China. And those conversations have been going on, in our Invest India offices, in respective boardrooms of companies, and so on. We haven't seen that transpire into a lot of action so far, but those conversations definitely have picked up a lot. They've been going on from early last year, and over the last few months, they have significantly picked up. In fact, I was looking at data from FDI Markets, which is a Financial Times service, and it shows that this year, I think for the first time, there are more greenfield projects that are being announced by U.S. companies coming into India than China for the year so far. I think it's around 39 for India and in the mid-20s in China. So I think there is definitely something substantial there. Then again, the government also is responding fairly quickly. Some of the initiatives that are being taken to make sure we don't lose this opportunity were mentioned by the previous speakers. And I will delve into a little more detail on all the kind of transformational work that is going on so that we don't miss this opportunity. But yeah, I will close with the fact that it is definitely not wishful, and it is really up to us to be able to get this home.
That's encouraging, Hoonar. Thank you so much. I think Rajesh, over to you for the next set of questions, please.
Deepak. So great conversation. The conversation was very much focused on US to India. We're going to now switch our table and talk about what's happening from Indian companies who are looking at inbound investment to the US. And I'm sure that most of the participants and the people who are attending the event, they must have seen the CII report that was released on June 16th of this year, where the Indian companies have pumped in over about $22 billion worth of direct FDI investment into the US. And they've created about 125,000 jobs, So that said, I think we will try to focus on, and the question will be geared to Dave and Tim. So Dave, what have you seen in your practice area, being a global tax head of Withum, what are the FDI norms or investment that you have seen from India to the US, Highlight on that side will help our, listeners.
Well, Raj, like the numbers indicate, there's a lot of investment inbound into the U.S. We are seeing a lot of different industries plowing funds into the U.S. And in order to address this inbound investment, we've created two programs. One is called Know Before You Go. And two, if you're already in the U.S., it's a tax health checkup. Because clearly businesses are making substantial investments and taxes impact the return on those investments. Clearly, our tax reform has created an opportunity at a 21% federal rate and a 0 to 15% state and city rate. We also want to make sure our inbound investors are aware that the federal government and also the 50 states are your partners, and they're looking for their share of taxes. And that creates a lot of opportunities on inbound investments. What do I mean by that? Well, what surprises many inbound investors is that each of our 50 states have different rules on direct tax, different rules on sales and use tax. So you need to be aware of that so-called silent state partner that you have. And more importantly, just because you're in the U.S. and complying with all the rules here, you also need to comply separately with each of the state rules. You may incorporate in Delaware, a common place to go. But if you're doing business in California and doing business in New York, you have 2 more tax returns to file. So the heads up on state taxation is critical on the inbound. States do not follow the international tax treaties between the U.S. and India, but clearly there is a lot of planning that goes around to drive efficiencies in our U.S.-India relationship. It is the land of opportunity, and we've created a lot of inbound books. In my role as HLB Global Tax Leader in 150 different countries, clearly the U.S.-India relationship is the strongest, but there's also indirect relationships between India and U.S. through other countries, and we can't lose sight of those indirect benefits. So at the end of the day, I think India and the U.S. are really reshaping world business, and there's a lot of opportunities moving forward. Time for a pause, Raj.
Good, thank you, Dave. Really appreciate it. Tim, over to you from legal perspective. So we did talk about, that there is an FDI investment coming into the U.S. and, what companies have to be aware of, as Dave had mentioned about the 50 states have their own laws, and then you have the federal state, laws. From legal perspective, what do you see and what are your thoughts, around that?
Let me start by following up on something that Dave said. While he said accurately that your states are your silent partners, one thing, as we have found with the COVID pandemic, the U.S. workforce, not unlike the rest of the world, has become virtual overnight. And as a result, because of the individuals possibly living in other jurisdictions from where they would normally go to an office and derive or perform their services, there could be some unknown tax liability from an employment perspective. So I just wanted to make sure I threw that out there. But in terms of other legal impacts, obviously an Indian company coming to the United States needs to marry the legal, the operational, and the tax issues together while making a decision on not only to come to the United States and not execute on an opportunity, but also where to locate, where to form, etc. One of the first things that we have to look at, and only because recently our President Trump has signed an executive order in February 2020 expanding our foreign investment in the United States review to such industries as medical supplies, PPE, and possibly even some food chain. So the first thing an Indian company would want to do is make sure that the investment that they're looking to make or an acquisition they're looking to make, it would be compliant or would be allowed under the CFIUS rules. But secondly, once you get past that, then it's, okay, where do we form legally? Dave mentioned Delaware, by far the most popular in the United States. Nevada, probably the second most popular, mainly because those states are very business friendly, allowing the companies to organize, manage themselves from a legal perspective the most flexible way. But once you're formed, then you have to, when you're determining a jurisdiction with which to operate, it's not only, say, Chicago, where I'm located, where we're interocean and we can easily travel when travel becomes possible again, and much more the norm, from coast to coast easily, but also, what states? These 50 states all have separate regulations, all have separate laws impacting, data privacy, data security, impacting advertising, impacting labor rules. For example, you're trying to stop your employee from stealing, trade secrets of the company. Well, Illinois has a business-friendly statute. California has an incredibly restrictive, almost pro-employee perspective on those issues. So you really have to look at the various states first to determine where you want to locate. And then go down to where Dave, I'm going to pick up again on Dave. Thank you very much for setting the table here. you go down further, each state and also the locations, the city locations, are all very much interested in attracting foreign investment. Austin, Texas, Chicago, Illinois, Kansas City, Missouri, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. These are cities that have done a really nice job of creating hubs, not only for related businesses such as technology hubs, but also, maybe symbiotic hubs where businesses from a variety of different service set and goods and services can help each other. Not like an incubator, but similar. And those hubs are almost always located in these cities where universities are prevalent, so that the attraction of talent and capital are there for the Indian companies coming into the United States. And then I'll finish with something that I think it is on everybody's mind, and that is, and I'm not an expert on this, but we have to be cognizant on the immigration rules as Indian companies come to the United States. Obviously there's going to be a culture that will need to be imparted on the United States operations, and that comes from the home office. And bringing people to the United States has obviously constricted over the last few months, but is always something to keep in mind. So those are sort of the broad legal issues that I think Indian companies need to be cognizant of.
And Raj, can I compliment what Tim's
Absolutely.
So you come to the U.S., you've invested a lot of money. There are other legal issues to address. Debt to equity is one of the bigger issues, and to the extent you use debt, intercompany loan documents must be in place. If you're declaring dividends, they're reflected in your minutes and resolutions. Royalty agreements are also big. Intercompany charges even bigger. And a lot of companies come to the U.S. without this legal documentation in place, and they can run havoc with the IRS in the States. So legal is very important in these intercompany agreements. Then finally, how are you going to get the money out? Is it going to wait for an exit? Is there going to be a sale or whatever? So very important. Land of opportunity, but a lot of issues.
Thank you, Dave. Really appreciate giving us a higher level flavor of what things companies should think about when they come into the U.S., from a DI investment perspective. So that said, I'm going to hand it over to Deepak, because we are going to switch our gears and talk about the business-related, concerns that we have to look at from cross-border perspective. So over to you, Deepak.
Thank you, Raj. Before I ask my question, I guess my next question is directed to Nishith on the legal and regulatory framework. I just want to reflect on two things that Tim and Dave mentioned from doing business in the U.S. One additional issue that Indian businesses should consider is the choice of law, which I think Tim alluded to, which is, which state law should you pick, whether it's New York or something else. And then equally important is waiver of jury trial, which is in your contract, your commercial contract that you're entering into with your counterparties here, because oftentimes Indian companies do not fare well when it comes to the jury system in the U.S., unfortunately. It's a whole discussion in itself, which I'll avoid now, but that's something that you might want to keep in mind when you come and invest in the U.S. and also decide which is the choice of law when it comes to commercial contracts. So that's it for now. So Nishith, coming to you, please. If you could please tell us in maybe 2-3 minutes, now what is the current legal and regulatory framework for foreign in India? And I also want to reflect on something that Sunil Kaul mentioned earlier, that as a businesses require predictability in India. And oftentimes, including more recently, we've had instances like the digital service tax, and also the recent proposal to regulate non-personal data on the privacy side of things, among other issues. So could you kind of please walk us through what the current regulatory framework is, what challenges you see, and what solutions you may have to kind of address some of those things, please?
Yeah, I think just too many questions in one question. Thank you so much. And, I'll just make a small comment also on, on the fact that as far as the U.S. is concerned, it has state-to-state, laws. It's in lighter vein, I say United States of America is most un-United States of America. As far as Indians are concerned, when you have to say in a contract, what is the governing law? You say governing law of India shall apply. But it is not the same thing in the US. You don't say governing law of the US. It's you have to refer to specific state at times and stuff like that, which understanding often doesn't exist in India. And it can make a lot of differences, was just mentioned, by previous speakers. Now, coming to India, I see two sets of things. Has the ease of doing business in India improved? I would say certainly yes, in many ways. And very simple thing, like I remember a few years ago, and Kamlesh, you know about it, about a few years ago, to incorporate a company in India took anywhere from 75 days to 90 days, just to incorporate a company. And just a few weeks ago, now we could incorporate company in 2.5 hours. Okay. So that kind of ease has also improved. Second biggest complaint, I think, if you have seen ease of doing business in India, is with regard to a lot of regulatory reforms that happen, but enforcement of contract has been one of the sore points in the whole thing. The way in which we look at is that now regulatory framework has improved. I'll deal with that in a moment. But enforcing the contracts is very important, and that weakness is seeming to be now receding to some extent because of two reasons. More and more contracts now contain arbitration clause, and neutral venues, particularly Singapore, has become very popular now. And most of the international disputes now go into arbitration if it is in the context of India. Second, judiciary has responded exceedingly well to the pandemic, because when lockdown started, within no time, the courts are doing sittings on what is called e-court basis. So all hearings and important urgent matters are immediately taken up. In fact, the adjournments have reduced, travel time is reduced, costs have gone down. And the most surprising thing was the judiciary has really speeded up itself in an amazing manner. So, of course, there are some issues because everybody's trying to come to grips with that. But things have become faster than ever before. And if in no time, I believe in next 1 or 2 years, judiciary will be one of the fastest in the world. I don't know. But I think that is the good news on one side. On the investment side also, by and large, I think India has probably one of the friendliest in terms of regulation for investment in almost most of the sectors. 90% of the sectors or 95% of the sectors are open to 100% foreign investment, And but the thing is that as far as the tax laws are concerned, that is where one of the bigger problem is, and a point was made, and it was very well made, that our tax rates have come to now 15% for new manufacturing units and 25% for other companies, which is a good rate, one of the good in the world. The problem is not just with regard to rate. The problem is with regard to the discretion that is available with the tax department. The drafting of law is often very poor, and therefore the intended benefits don't easily percolate to the investors. And difficulty is that some laws like general anti-avoidance, place of effective management, which causes foreign companies with some kind of control in India, are deemed to be tax residents in India. So, when you invest in the US, those companies could be deemed tax resident, and there are some subjective and subjective criteria, so mix up of that. That is what is causing a problem. So subjectivity in many regulations, I would personally think that we should look at every law with fine comb, and every discretion that is granted should be very carefully evaluated and see how can its abuse be avoided or eliminated. Number two, the laws are ambiguous, and number two, that because of the problems, the penalties and prosecutions have become more common. So every civil offense is turning to become a criminal offense, and many a times the directors are held up, not only Indian directors, but the parent company directors and stuff like that, which is, imprisonment and other kind of stuff. and cases don't close very quickly. That is where the problem is. So, of course, these are business risks. So one has to be very careful about the dealing with the regulatory framework, and I think we'll discuss about Chinese investment neighboring country in a minute or two. But I thought I'll just stop here. There are a lot of interesting opportunities. As far as services are concerned, I think that's the basic thing. There's minimum issues. Governance is improving, of course, in these recent times. A lot of cases of scams and scandals have come out, and I think governance is becoming a little trickier. But old economic companies have this problem. New economic companies have generally been better governed because it's a fresh baby and people have taken care of it. But still, the respect for the corporate governance is still not at a level at which one would hope to have it. It could happen as we mature. I'm not pessimistic about that. And so I think, and as I mentioned, a lot of investment is coming to India in technology and other sectors. So hopefully that also will change the culture in India. And Chinese thing we'll discuss separately when you want me to. I don't take away too much time.
Thank you so much. That's very helpful. I think we can go down some of the things in some of the questions, the forthcoming questions. And I'm kind of mindful of the time. So Raj, over to you to the next question.
Deepak. So I think Mr. Desai has touched on the legal aspect of doing, how companies are facing challenges in India. Now we're going to talk about the tax side. I know that 10 years ago or 12, 15 years ago, when a U.S. company would like to set up a legal entity in India, it would take a year and a half, or 2 years. A lot of nuances from tax, regulatory, and compliance perspective. But that said, the question is addressed to Kamlesh. Kamlesh, what have you seen? That from tax and regulatory perspective, how the FDI norms in India and companies, what are the fastest way of them to set up their operations in India, and what are the challenges that they're facing, from setting up their operations in India?
So let me address, Nishith has very rightly articulated some of the issues, and let me touch upon an issue which is not necessarily related to India, but entire globe. The way these cross-border transactions are to be taxed is an issue which every country is grappling. This base erosion and, which country taxes what profit, where does the situs of the profit arise, who taxes, which country should not tax, treaty shopping, so these are issues which are, I think, each and every country is facing. India is equally facing. As far as the march of the tax department is concerned, we are marching towards global, and we are very quick in accepting what is coming out of OECD on, taxing global and cross-border transaction and international tax. So that's the Indian tax department is very efficient in bringing it. The challenge is that they make good laws, as Nishith rightly pointed out. They make very good laws, but when it comes to implementation, the interpretation, the discretions, there the challenges arise, and therefore I think the government must do something to institutionalize a framework whereby there is certainty on things. And having said that, of course, they have put into place the advance ruling authority, where if any non-resident has any issue about how a particular transaction is going to be taxed, you file before them and they will give you an answer as to what. But of course, of late, the judicial as well as the advance ruling authority, the move is towards more going to substance rather than form. Because often in the past, when taxation was more on form, now it has moved to substance. So if in substance something is taxable, they go out of the way and say that it's taxable. Even the tax advance ruling authority has now, really gone into that, I should say, top gear in terms of deciding on those issues. Nishith also pointed out about the general anti-avoidance rules, which are relatively new, which have not yet been tested fully in courts of law. But I'm sure the way it is widely worded, with the kind of powers which are given to the officers, the revenue officers, it will open plethora of issues before the let me give you some that laws are fully based, totally tech-driven. E-filings are technology based. Even trying to make it technology based, you just file your documents, some of not necessarily disclosing who the taxpayer is, and passing an order. So maybe those kind of things, and they've constituted a complete cell which will monitor what the qualitative aspects of such assessments, and therefore I believe that those issues would come down. So having said that, I think those are the comments on the challenges which any entity, not necessarily international entities, but even the domestic entities face as far as tax laws are concerned. Back to you, Rajesh.
Thank you, Kamlesh. I think that's a very valid point that you and also Dave had mentioned it earlier, that any cross-border transaction, whether you're doing a business from US to India or India to the US, your intercompany transaction agreement has to be properly placed, and proper items have to be highlighted, whether it's your royalty, it's the services, or it's, any kind of an R&D work has to be properly reported as a part of your intercompany transaction, and making sure that your transfer pricing is done correctly in India, knowing very well that Indian tax authorities are pretty notorious from transfer pricing perspective, where the markups have to be proper, knowing that US is very lean, not so, notorious. They're very lenient, but I think now it's ramping up, and as Dave had alluded, that US is also gearing up, on the transfer pricing and making sure people are compliant from and being properly reporting all the intercompany transactions. So that said, Mr. Desai, any thoughts from your side on legal side? Just maybe a 1 minute session. If you could highlight something from the legal side.
I think two things. One, I would also just add to what Kamlesh mentioned on the tax. I believe time has come for India and of course our community at Indo-American Chamber of Commerce and other colleagues. I think I've been mooting one concept of one world, one tax somewhere on the line in 10, 15 years time. The issues which he mentioned, they all relate to technology. Now today, all businesses happen in cloud. So to find what is the source of an income and what is the residence even is becoming more and more tricky. So we'll need to have a global formula, and where one side the issue is that you can have taxation cross-border, and from tax terrorism, which expression I used in 2014 and became popular, but other expression I would use is today is about tax imperialism. Means every country wants to have extraterritorial tax laws and want to encroach on the taxing territory of the other country, and therefore a lot of conflicts. And on the one side, you talk about tax credit, but tax credit is becoming a major issue. India has introduced like equalization levy. It is creating its own problems. Other income tax, not GST and stuff like that. So we'll have to move to a system where there is one world, one tax. At least taxpayer should be ensured that he will not be taxed twice. You tell us 15%, 20% tax rate. You put in an escrow account, and let the countries fight rather than tax lawyers and accountants fighting for the companies, because we say we pay whatever you want. Period. Give me a formula. The biggest problem with base erosion and profit shifting, they have not defined what is based, and that is source. And I don't want to go into technicalities at this moment, but our countries, both countries, have an opportunity to lead the thought leadership in the world together to have some kind of one world, one tax concept. Maybe it will take 5, 10, 15 years. But if you start today, perhaps you'll get there. That is one part of the tax. I think that's a passionate subject I own right now. But second thing, as far as the legal issues are concerned, I think things are getting a little better at times, but there is also sometimes one step backward, one step forward, two step backward, or otherwise. And we have to really be careful to find what kind of balance we want, because you cannot have two controlled economy and regulatory system, and I think we have to move fast towards each of the laws to look into and reform, particularly legacy issues, labor laws and other ones. That one we will need to refine. But I think, and one more small point I'll finish with. See, we look at past. Okay, you have to correct that. Present are the operational issues. Immediately you need to resolve them. But most important thing is that the future is to be looked at. So laws have to be already thought of in terms of what future technologies are going to come. So what we call anticipate, prepare, and deliver. That means you look every new technology, every new business model, every new social, political, economic development, bring along with it the new legal, tax, strategic, and ethical issues. So we should look at the future technologies that are coming up. For example, driverless car. Okay, I was talking to once the CEO of the Uber and with the Chief Minister of Maharashtra, previous one, and they out of the whole world, they selected 5 cities in the world to bring flying cars. In 5 years' time, flying car will be reality, and 10 years' time it will be common mode of transport. And Mumbai was one of the cities they selected that this is where we want to experiment out of the 5 cities in the world. Okay, so my take was that they will bring flying cars, but our regulatory regime will not be in place. So we should start thinking of that. So whether it's driverless car, IoT, we had recently fought a case on blockchain and cryptocurrency. That's going to be the next thing. IoT, robotics, AR, VR, 3D printing, all the things we need to really start working on. Start framing laws so you don't bring laws in a hurry. I'm sorry for explaining too much, but at the future you.
I agree with you. I agree, Mr. Yeah, I agree with you, and I think that's a very valid point you made. So I think that's something that government has to think about. The law should be implemented based on the technology that's coming. So thank you. Really appreciate it. I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Deepak to start the next panel of the questions.
Thank you, Raj. Thank you, Mr. Desai. That was very helpful. So I guess question to Tim and Dave from a U.S. perspective. Tim and Dave, we live in a world that is defined by trade wars and protectionist measures, including the Make in America move by the Trump administration more recently. In this current environment, what challenges do you foresee for Indian and other non-U.S. businesses from first coming to the U.S. and also doing business in the U.S.? I know that one of you have previously touched upon the new immigration laws, but could both of you please expand on those, please?
Sure. Tim, you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll take you, Dave, first. Yeah, one, two, please.
Okay, so why don't I talk about tax law and how it has an impact on global business. But clearly, tax policy drives growth. Tax policy, as we're seeing recently, will have a major impact on stabilization of a downturn. In 2017, we had a major tax law change, and that was the driving force to bring more business to the U.S. Unfortunately, it probably did have an impact on U.S.-India structures. And not that it was a major impact, but it required many companies that are doing business in both countries to relook at how they're doing business. So, for example, there was new rates introduced, lower rates, so U.S. almost became a tax haven, not quite, but it's still more favorable in certain cases to be in India and take part of those rates. The U.S. now has incentives to bring profits and keep intangible assets onshore, and they've got complicated calculations on those incentives and penalties. So you've got the carrot, you got the stick, and more importantly, the BEAT rules, and I don't need to go into a lot of detail, but it also impacts, companies that are very large that may be making payments to offshore companies like to India, and there's now a surcharge. So it does require rewriting the book on India-U.S. transaction structures, and as I mentioned before, the transactions between the countries. All new rules, but we are smart people. We'll make it happen.
But from a legal perspective, the challenges that Indian companies face coming, or other non-U.S. businesses coming to the United States to do business, besides the obvious of the economic downturn caused from the pandemic and those challenges, and of course the immigration, which I referred to earlier, those changing laws, I really do focus on the virtual workforce. It's the most, it really is a paradigm shift for the United States. We have almost overnight gone decentralized in our business approach, and it's keeping the productivity, the community in the workplace, and then attracting new business opportunities. That is really, I think, one of the largest challenge companies coming in the United States. I mean, it's the same challenge for us here in the United States, but that to me is the largest challenge today.
And I think it also creates opportunities for the inbound funds into the U.S. Well, it may take business away from India, but there's new opportunities to enter into the U.S. and take advantage of these investment opportunities. So businesses will, and the C-suite will figure it out.
Understood. Thank you, Dave. I want to go back to Sunil and Hoonar on the business side of things. And Sunil and then Hoonar, what are some of the significant process and executional considerations that create transactional complexity in the effort to comply with otherwise reasonable historic expectations? And also, from a business perspective, what changes would you like to see in the future to provide businesses like yours with the necessary reassurances when it comes to doing business in India? So maybe Sunil, you could go first, followed by Hoonar.
Sure, thank you. Well, we think, and I think as Kamlesh and Mr. Desai has said, India has done some really good work on the regulatory simplifications front, and that has certainly helped. Though in my view, and I think everyone sort of agrees, this remains a work in progress. So, if you, for example, look at, say, the tax and investment structures, if we make investing and exiting investments in India more flexible with less swings in the FDI regulations or the ambiguity and discretion on the tax side, whether it is dividends or capital gains, that would be immensely reassuring for folks like us who are trying to, make some of these investments. So, for instance, when you look at, investing, the complexities of investing through the FPI and the FDI routes and the different regulations for each, the floor pricing regulation limitations, or the checks and limits on transfers between resident and non-resident beneficiaries, which oftentimes leads to deals not fructifying. Limitations on use of capital market instruments like convertible or preferred instruments. All of this can complicate deal situations and make investments a little harder to make. And then, of course, time is also a key factor, especially when the commercial contours of an investment or its pricing are subject to changes with time. This is particularly a problem when we have to seek approvals from multiple authorities, like, say, RBI and, I think Mr. Desai mentioned insurance, so IRDA, SEBI, CCI, and so on. And during that period, the price can move and it makes deal making extremely complicated. So to sum up, I think that there has been encouraging progress, including some recent, developments on delegation of powers to RBI for FDI-related matters. And, we have to acknowledge these improvements, but I think I repeat, much still, it's still work in progress and a lot needs to be done to make it easier. Thanks.
Thank you, Sunil. Hoonar, over to you.
Thank you, Deepak. So while Sunil talked about the more structural issues that we see and what needs to be done there, let me just quickly mention, as I had said earlier, let me just quickly mention what all we are doing along with the central government and the state governments here in India, which should hopefully bring in some substantial changes in the short to medium term over the next year or two. I think the first bucket is around digital transformation of all government services and processes. Now, I know that doesn't address some of the very fundamental or structural issues that were being discussed, but I think in itself that would be a big step forward. One of the things we are doing under that is creating a single window system for all investors, including foreign investors, where they would just have one portal online to go to, which will tell them once they have shared certain inputs from their side, it would tell them what all approvals they need. And not just that, it would also allow them to apply for those approvals from that single portal. Now, I think that would be a first step, which would at least bring into the sunlight all the various kinds of complexities, redundancies, processes that exist. And then we can continue building from there and simplifying it. As Mr. Panjwani had said in his introduction, rightfully, when we started this exercise, we realized there were about 700 different approvals across 35 central ministries that needed to be obtained depending on what kind of investor you are and so on. In fact, I'll add another data point to that. We actually found that there were more than 3,000 inputs that those 700 approvals needed before they could be assessed and provided by the central government. So that's one. I will run through the others very quickly. That's the first one, single window. Then we have an industrial information system that's going online. It's already partly online, where there would be a large pool of ready plug-and-play land for industrial use. The final vision is that somebody sitting in their office, for example, in New Jersey or in Los Angeles, should be able to have a look at the land, the ecosystem around, all the facilities, and should be able to, in fact, go to the extent of leasing that out and getting all the approvals and so on. A first version of that has already been released. So that's more around digital transformation. That, of course, within the center and the states, there are certain more short-term actions or initiatives that have been taken to ensure a smoother facilitation, including setting up of a very dedicated group of secretaries headed by the cabinet secretary himself, who are looking at individual investments and projects which need facilitation and fast tracking. So all of this work is underway, and hopefully we should see some really good progress.
Hoonar, thank you so much. Raj, over to you for the last two set of questions.
Absolutely. Thank you, Deepak. Really appreciate it. So I think we're going to spend, maybe the question is going to be to Nishith and Kamlesh, So I know that the Indian government had a sunset clause in the special economic zone. March of this year, the special economic zone, was not extended. That's what we were all hoping for. But they also have the Gift City initiative in Gujarat. And what are your thoughts? What are the new incentives and benefits you think? And maybe in a minute, if each one of you can answer that, is there any other incentive that the government of India is going to come out with, knowing that Gift City is another thing on the horizon, but there was a sunset clause for the special economic zone. So that's it. Over to you, Nishith Bhai, and then followed by Kamlesh.
Yes. In fact, with Gift City, I was involved right from its conceptual days in 2007, and when I'd gone with Mr. Modi to Singapore, and the idea came up. What happened was that it got notified in 2011, and then later on, a lot of issues were there. Ultimately, we got unified regulatory authorities. I think now there is one authority which gives all the approvals, except that the tax department is not part of it, but they are driving some of those changes as well. In the last few days or few months, we have focused heavily on Gift City becoming a catalyst for an investment rather than just becoming like manufacturing place or SEZ of its own type, to have its own exemption and stuff like that. But what is done is to create an ecosystem for fund industry. Now, private equity, hedge funds, and other funds, I think they contribute immediately and large amounts of money. A lot of foreign investment can be channelized through them. So current focus is on, apart from the other changes on the fund industry changes, and there are issues relating to GST which are sorted out. The issues relating to pass-through sorted out. Only yesterday, the PAN number and all this troublesome things were there for subject of course KYC, but those ones have been sorted out. So I think they are moving a little fast forward, and today the chairman of the authority has also made a statement asking tax department to be a little more generous, not to do pin tricking and stuff like that. So I think at the moment there is a lot more fast forward work going on, because India wants to take the opportunity of tapping financial services sector, which has undergone some difficulty in Hong Kong. And of course, Mauritius has been there, but at the same time, because of OECD and some other issues, there are, things which need to be taken care of. So India is working on that. They want to become more like Hong Kong, Singapore, or other jurisdictions on the planet. But financial services sector has a huge impact. I remember helping Mauritius government develop financial services sector, offshore financial center in 1991, and there was zero contribution nearly. Today, about 13% of the GDP is contributed by financial services sector, and it has become a global. The skill set that is in come up. I don't want to go too long at the moment, but I think gift city is another avenue you must look at, and maybe Mr. Vikamsey can talk a little bit about on the sunset clause. It was extended.
Really appreciate that.
Into getting,
Right. Thank you, Mr. Vikamsey. Over to you.
Yes. So Rajesh, I mean, there's no new government as far as government may think of companies who want to establish their businesses just for overseas business. You manufacture and just export your goods outside India. So maybe something of the special economic zone may come back, but of course there's no news as of now as far as the government of India is concerned. And of course, Gift City, Nishith has very eloquently explained what are the benefits of establishing oneself in the Gift City. Back to you, Rajesh.
Thank you, appreciate it. So switching gears, I think I'm going to have the next question to Dave and Tim. So as you know that, U.S. is looking at, Trump administration is looking at Make in America move has been, one of the key initiatives of the President Trump. But that said, what are the incentives and benefits, that you see from, maybe U.S. federal and state tax perspective? And then I'm going to hand it over to, Dave to answer that, and then Tim can address and highlight something from the legal side as well. So over to you, Dave.
Sure. Again, we talked about the 50 states we have here. So the incentives are not just at the federal level, but also at the state level. And we often talk about tax incentives, but there's lots of non-tax incentives also. So looking at the federal level quickly, we're allowed to expense capital items in the year of acquisition and placing in service. That's a major change that's occurred a few years ago, but it continues on to keep the economy moving. There is also a lot of incentives in this COVID environment that it may not be too late to come on board and get some federal incentives. But more importantly, we've got a great research facility, including credits for doing the appropriate research. Then what you'll find in states who are hungry to attract business here, there are credits and incentives for increasing the number of jobs in a particular state. There are also expenditure credits for expanding manufacturing and equipment purchases. So there's a whole laundry list, but there's also grants and low interest rate loans that you can obtain here in the U.S. But clearly, you may not want to borrow money, but to be involved in a capital infusion of foreign direct investment. So, Raj, the list can go on and on and on, but we're open for business.
Thank you, Dave. Tim, over to you.
Following up on Dave's table setting here, I appreciate it. Well, let's see. Recently, the Trump administration formed a U.S. International Development Finance Corporation. It's really meant to offer billions of dollars to help reshore manufacturing in targeted areas as a result of COVID, PPE production, generic drug production, et cetera. There is talk of expanding that to other industries, really to help, they call it the reshoring of the manufacturing jobs in the United States. Nothing has moved forward as a result after they formed it, as far as I know. Beyond that, as Dave said, yes, every local, and I alluded to earlier, every local municipality of any size, especially when they have the university platform for the talent, has created these incentive zones as well as, hubs in order to attract businesses. But in terms of legal incentives, the only incentive, frankly, that I wish they would focus more on, and there's been discussions over the years of limiting the liability exposure for businesses operating in the United States. We are a very litigious environment here at the United States, as everybody probably knows, and being able to avoid or limit your legal liability would really be the best incentive to attract businesses. But as of today, even the talk of limiting liability for companies reopening during the COVID pandemic is still being fought by the various political constituencies. So that's what I have been following.
Thank you, Tim. Really appreciate it, and that's a good insight. So that's what I'm going to hand it over to Deepak to do the ask the last question before we open up for the Q&A after that.
Thanks, Rob.
Over to you, Deepak.
Maybe I'll start with Tim and then follow with the rest of the panelists. So I think we are into our last segment, folks. And again, thank you so much for participating, especially you, Sunil, and I'm getting really late for you in Singapore. So I'll be quick. Just kind of the quick round, we'll go around the table, and maybe Tim, why don't you go first, please? Any closing remarks as we kind of conclude the conversation? And then if they're after you, and then so on and so forth.
I think the positivity here needs to be underscored. The United States, like so many different economies, has opportunities even in downturns. There's always there's capital looking for opportunities both here and abroad. The United States is a very attractive marketplace for a variety of industries. And I think the Indian companies or Indian investor looking to the United States has many opportunities to attract that capital, to attract the incentives, especially if there is job creation associated with it. There's many pockets of incentives, whether it be tax or otherwise, to help those businesses.
Thank you. Dave, in 10 seconds, how about you, please?
It's clear that there's lots of incentives in India, lots of incentives in the U.S., so I think the countries have to do it jointly and take advantage of all the opportunity and reduce the business risk. So I'm for joint.
Thank you. Mr. Desai? How about you?
Oh, yeah, I've got just about 2-3 points very quickly. One with regard to the neighboring country investment, which I thought I'll deal with that later on. So India has brought in regulation that if any person from China or neighboring country has to make investment into India, it will require special government approval. But the expression used is any beneficial interest or shareholding, Now that is not defined. So if you have a foreign US company in which China has already made investment, even 1% otherwise, would that be hit with special approval? So we are getting back to approval process, and I think India needs to very quickly clarify these regulations. If it is directly from those countries is one thing, but indirect from other countries and other companies is one other point. Second point I would suggest is we should actively at the Indo-American Chamber of Commerce look at facilitation of bilateral investment protection treaty. I doubt very large investment would come from the US into manufacturing sector if we do not resolve that issue. And I remember earlier we had a lot of OPEC and others who used to provide insurance, but now there is a little problem. And India has lost some cases and the BIP cases, I would not get into detail at this point in time. But I think bilateral investment protection treaty, I think we should quickly resolve. Otherwise, we'll buy goods, material, defense equipment, etc. But manufacturing will still remain behind. Even investment from the US, large investment will always look for BIT. These are two important points I thought there are 10 other things I can talk, but not right now. We'll have some other, time to discuss that.
Sunil, how about you? Any closing remarks?
Yeah, I guess I would very emphatically say that the Indian demographics, the long runway for growth, the improving regulatory infrastructure, I think they offer a pretty compelling investment thesis, from my perspective as an investor. So yeah, sure, there are things to be worked out, and we obviously have a lot of suggestions. But I think the closing thought from me is that we are very bullish on the prospects in India.
Thank you, Sunil. Kamlesh, how about you?
Yeah, so I'm born and brought up in India, and I've been in practice for the last more than 35 years. And I've seen the evolution of laws and taxation in India, which my fellow panelists have also mentioned. Looking at all that, and I've seen the improvements which have taken place in the recent past, and I'm very optimistic that, and the government is hearing things very fast. They're taking quick actions. As Hoonar also rightly pointed out, facilitation for more business, and therefore I would only close by saying that please invest in India. You have a huge market, you have a huge middle class which are consuming, and we are growing. So with that, I would optimistically, close my remarks. Thank you, Deepak.
Thank you, Kamlesh. And Hoonar, how about you? What do you see? Closing remarks.
So Deepak, I'll keep it very short. I'll just say that if there is anybody out there who is thinking of investing in India or investing anywhere and is still uncertain, because these are uncertain times, please reach out to us. The very existence of Invest India, the National Investment Promotion Agency, is testimony to the government's commitment to facilitate anybody who is looking to invest.
Thank you, Hoonar. Naushad, over to you. And Suhas, yes.
Thank you, Deepak. Thank you, Rajesh, for an excellent job done. Not only have you covered so many questions in such a short time and evoked fantastic response from all the panelists, but also you have managed to close in time, which I was worried about. I think I have my compliments to you, and I was worried about Sunil, who's logged in from Singapore. It is way past his bedtime. I don't know whether Sunil you'll sleep or you'll stay awake for a couple of hours and stay in your day. But thanks, Rajesh. Thanks, Deepak. We are unable to take questions from the panelists right now, but rest assured, we had asked for questions in advance, and we have received 250 questions in advance, and those were given to Rajesh and Deepak, and they have incorporated most of their questions in their questions. So that's the situation. And with that, may I request Suhas Paranjpe, the President of Bombay Chartered Accountants Society, to propose his vote of thanks. So while he gets himself unmuted.
Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, all seniors and friends. I am Suhas Paranjpe, President, Bombay Chartered Accountants Society for the year 2021. I am here to propose a very well deserved vote of thanks to all of you. It was an excellent panel discussion with a very relevant subject today for two important economies. It's a great privilege and honor to present the vote of thanks on this occasion. To begin with, today we must thank God, digital and technology to enable us to connect seamlessly. So thank you, digital transformation. On behalf of IACC and BCAS, I would like to thank our panelists for sharing their insights and expertise in the matters of taxation, policies, and legal obligations for FDI and FPI into India and the USA. We had a panel of stalwarts today. My heartiest gratitude to each and every one of them, and our thanks to, namely, Mr. Nishith Desai, founder and partner, Nishith Desai Associates, Mr. Sunil Kaul, Managing Director and Head Southeast Director Asia Head Southeast Asia Carlyle Group, Mr. Hoonar Jan, Co-Head Americas Region Invest India, Mr. Dev Springsteen, Partner Withum, Mr. Kamlesh Vikamsey, Senior Partner Khimji Kunverji and Company, and Mr. Timothy Lavender, Partner Kelley and Drye. The two moderators have done a brilliant job in picking the minds of these experts and in doing the condensed session. Thank you, Mr. Rajesh Tripathy and Mr. Deepak Nambiar. I would like to thank the audience for giving such an overwhelming response to this Indo-US bilateral investment series. The success of this series would be incomplete without our partners' contributions. Kindly bear with me just for a few seconds with me while I acknowledge their names. Mr. Vivek Abraham, Invest India. Mr. Neil Jensen, Arkansas State Economic Development Commission. Mr. Niranjan Hirachandani, Assocham, India. Dr. Kavita Lagate, Bombay Management Association. Mr. Neil Gonuguntla, Dallas Indo-American Chamber of Commerce. Mr. Sharad Kumar Saraf, Federation of Indian Export Organization. Mr. Sheetal Pansare, Futurism Technologies. Ms. Anita Ninan, Georgia Indo-American Chamber of Commerce. Mr. Colin Shah, James and Jewelry Exports Promotion Council. Mr. Jagdeep Ahuwalia, Indo-American Chamber of Commerce, Greater Houston. Mr. Deepak Nambiar, once again, Kelley, Drye. Mr. Sanjay Mehta, Material Recycling Association of India. Mr. John Woodward, Metro Atlanta Chamber of Commerce. Mr. Chintan Patel, Narsi Monji Institute of Management Studies. Mr. Nishith Desai, once again, Nishith Desai Associates. Mr. Rajesh Tripathy, once again, Withum. Mr. Nilesh Vikamsey, Chairman, BFSI Committee, IACC, WIC. Last but not the least, on behalf of BCAS, I would like to thank Mr. Naushad Panjwani, Regional President, IACC, West India Council, and our past President for conceiving such a brilliant event with the goal of strengthening Indo-US trade ties and for bringing all these trade associations on the same platform and giving us the opportunity to partner for this excellent series. I would also like to thank Payal Chatterjee, Mukesh More, and the rest of NDA team and Dharini Shah. Thanks are also due to the IACC Secretariat led by Mr. Kamal, Vora, and Raki. Finally, I would like to thank you all for your participation, and now I would like to take permission from all the dignitaries present here to end the program with advisory to stay home, stay safe, and take best care of yourself. Thank you very much.